Okay, so this is a Iyov Prologue Part 3. We will review what we did last time, but I actually want to take up a methodology question first. And this is a question I get asked a lot, and I don't know a good time to talk about this, so I think this is a logical time. So the question is, um, which commentaries would you recommend on Sefer Iyov? Okay. I don't think we talked about this. If it's sounding familiar, let me know that so I guess the pre-answer is there are two, I guess broadly speaking, okay, broadly speaking, there are I'll say um three styles of commentary on Iyov. Okay, and I'm saying broadly speaking because they're not necessarily rigid categories. Okay, so there are the philological commentaries, there are the philosophical commentaries, and then there are the hybrids. Is this sounding familiar at all? It
I think
is?
we touched on this topic. I don't know if we talked about it in
Okay.
this framework though.
Okay, fine. All right. So I'll go over this part really quickly. I think the next part, I don't think I gave my specific answer. So philological ones are focused on explaining, primarily uh, focused on explaining the words, okay, which are difficult. And then the philosophical ones are primarily focused on drawing out the philosophical underpinnings. And then the hybrids do both in equal measure, okay, or at least care about both, okay. So I think what you want, in my opinion, is you want these two, the philosophical or the hybrids, because n- knowing the words in Eo is only going to get you so far. And I know I've given this example before, but like I this seared itself in my memory of this when I was in my second year of yeshiva, there were first year yeshiva guys who sat down to try to learn through Parshas Breshis just with a dictionary, and they thought they fancied themselves knowing like grammar and stuff like that. And like, I wanted to say like, not only is this one of the most obscure parts of Torah, but like, even if you could figure, first of all, the words themselves are very difficult, but like, even if you could figure it out, you can't just get it out of the words. You need like philosophical guidance. Okay, so my current answer, and I think this part is new, is I recommend um let's how should I put this delicately? Three and maybe four commentaries. Okay, each with pros and cons. Okay, so number one commentary is the Rambam. Okay, and the pros are he's the Rambam. Okay, and so like I obviously like I'm already in his worldview. I'm more familiar with his positions and his works than other Rishonim. Okay, second is he's philosophical. Okay. Um, he's philosophical. Okay. But the cons are he didn't write a commentary. Okay. But only chapters in the Mora. Okay. And I want to show you what this looks like here. Okay. And this is going to be like sneak peek of like something we'll do probably months down the line. So the Mor Nevuchim is split into three halakim, three sections. Pelik Shlishi begins with Ma'aseh Merkava, which is the Rambam's exposition on, the deepest part of what people loosely call Kabbalah. It's the first seven chapters. Okay, so technically speaking, he has two chapters on Iyov. Okay, and they are chapters 22 and 23. Okay, that's where he talks about Iyov explicitly. However, he also has chapters 17 and 18 where he talks about his views on Hashgacha Pratis. Okay, but it seems like the consensus is that all the chapters from chapter 8, which is after Masim Merkava, through chapter 23 is necessary for understanding the Rambam's view. Okay, so it's not a commentary on Iyov, and then when he talks about Iyov, he only basically just defines each of the views and then links them up with his views on Hashgacha. So it's chapters in the Moreh which are difficult and which the ideas of Iyov need to be like, I guess I don't want to say like teased out of, but like I guess teased out of and synthesized with all the rest of his comment, all the rest of his uh chapters 3, 8 through 23. Okay, so like it is very difficult, and then there's one more con as well, which is that on top of that, he wrote the Moreh, but especially these chapters, or not especially, but like including these chapters, let's say, including these esoterically. Okay, so like he is deliberately trying to conceal views from people who are not ready to understand them. Okay, and consequently, there is a lot of debate on what he meant. All right, so if I had to pick one like total approach to Iyov, Rambam's would be the approach. Okay, so that's like my number one recommendation. By the way, stop me if you have any questions here. Okay, I just wanted to like get this out. So if someone asks me like what should I learn in for Iyov, I can like have the answer here. Okay, number two is Ralbag. Okay, so the pros are he's philosophical. Okay, and provides a philological, so I guess he's hybrid, right? So he's hybrid and explains every pasuk. Okay, so that's great, and he's generally Maimonidean. Okay, in other words, there's an extreme overlap between the two. Okay, but the cons are, according to Rambam, Rabag might be a heretic, okay, because he denies, God's absolute omniscience. All right, and also he is heavily Aristotelian. Okay, whereas the Rambam is Aristotelian, but not as heavily as the Rabag. Also, oh, sorry, there's one more pro, which is that so he explains every pasuk. He's generally Maimonidean, and he does not believe in esotericism. Okay. In other words, like he's not deliberately concealing anything. Okay. And he has the same presentation, sorry, the same ideas presented in his Iyov commentary and in his Milchamos Hashem. Okay, which is his like more nevuchim. Okay, so you can the Iyov commentary. It seems like the consensus is he wrote it for people who are more rooted in traditional Jewish learning, and he's teaching these ideas on Hashgacha through commentary. And Milchamos Hashem is written for more philosophically oriented people, and he's expounding those ideas per se, but then showing how they're reflected in Iyov. So you get two presentations. Okay. But again, cons are he might be a heretic according to the Rambam, okay, and he's heavily Aristotelian, and I think there was another con. Oh, sorry, there's another pro. Is there is an English translation, okay? It's published by some obscure company. Do I have it over here? I'm looking around. I don't see where my copy is right now, but there is an English copy. Yeah, and there's one for the Rambam also. But I'm saying like if you want like a usable Iyov commentary, there is one. Yeah, Esty.
Sorry, just about he might be a heretic.
Yeah.
How does one proceed in a situation like that when you hear of someone who may have views that are heretical?
Good question. So I'll give you the responsible answer, and then I'll tell you the irresponsible answer. So the responsible answer is as to quote Rabbi Zucker, Safek Kfir L'chumra, that if you're in doubt about whether something is heresy, then you should be strict. So there's an isser in that we say twice a day. Lo sasuru achrei levav achrei einechem. Do not stray after your heart and after your eyes. Or sorry, do not explore after your heart and after your eyes. Shera tamzonim achrei, which you stray after. Rambam talks about this in Hilchos Avodah Zarah v'Chukos Hagoyim 2, 1, and 2. Okay, so he says that with Avodah Zarah, then it is usher to explore after Avodah Zarah because it could lead you to believe in it and to practice it. Okay, but then he says in Gimel, so this is in the issue of Al Tifnu El Ha'elim, do not turn towards the false gods. Person, all these prohibitions are in one category, one concept, that a person should not turn after Avodah Zarah. Look, if you turn towards it in a way that involves an action, then you get lashes. Okay, now that's al tifnu. Then he says like this: not only Avodah Zarah is it prohibited to turn after in thought, rather any thought that causes a person to uproot one of the foundations of Torah, musharin an shelo lahalosa al libeno. We are prohibited to not bring it to mind. V'lo nasiach da'atenu l'kach, or I guess don't bring it to heart and don't occupy your mind with it. V'nachshav v'nimshach achrei hirhurei lev, and think about it and be drawn after the musings of the heart. Because man's mind is deficient or limited, and not all minds can grasp the truth clearly. And if each person were to be drawn after the thoughts of his heart, then he would end up destroying the entire world based due to the deficiency of his mind. Ketzad. So what's an example of this? Sometimes a person will explore after avodah zarah. Sometimes he'll think about the oneness of the Creator. Shemahu, Shemeno. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe God is one, maybe He's not. Malamala, Malamata. What is above? What is below? Malafanim alachor. What is before and what will come after? Debate about what those things mean. But I think plain shot is Malafanim malachor. What came before the universe and what will come after? Malamala is what is certain speculations about like metaphysical, non-physical existences like God and the angels. And Malamata, I have my own theory about Malamata. Sometimes he'll think about prophecy. He'll muse about prophecy. Shemehi emes v'shemeina. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Upamim b'Torah. Maybe sometimes he'll think about Torah. Shemehi min hashmayim shemeina. Maybe it's from heaven, maybe it's not. Ve'eno yodea hamidos shiyadun behen al shiyida ha'emes al burio. And he will not know the literally measures, but I think we would substitute the term methodology, or the methodological principles is like what we would say in the modern language, to assess them until he knows the truth clearly. And as a consequence, he'll go out into heresy. While Indian he's here at Torah. Regarding this, the Torah warns the Ne'emar ba, and it said about it, do not explore after your heart and after your eyes that you stray after. Klomar, meaning lo yimashech kol echad mikem achar dato hakatzara, meaning that a person, individuals should not be drawn after their deficient minds, and imagine that their minds have apprehended the truth. This is what the sages said. After your heart means heresy, and after your eyes is referring to lewdness, lechery, sexual depravity, or sexual, I don't know if depravity is the right word, indulgence. This prohibition, even though it can cause a person to be driven out of olam haba, in bo malchus. There's no lashes, because it's not involving an action. Okay, so simply speaking, Rambam says that this lo sase midoraisa is to occupy your mind with anything that could cause you to uproot one of the fundamentals of Torah. And it is severe lo sase, and according to the Sefer Chinuch, this is one of the 6 mitzvos that is obligatory constantly, for all people at all times, which are, Anochi Hashem Elkacha, knowing that God exists, Yichud Hashem, God's oneness, love of God, fear of God, not believing in other gods, and then this one. So this is like a big isser. Okay, so that's on paper. That if there's any danger that you're going to uproot one of the fundamentals of Torah, then it's usher to occupy your mind with that. Okay. However, the Satan is in the details. Okay. That one question is, what exactly does the Rambam hold as usher? And I gave a shir on this actually 5 years ago this week. Okay, in Lomdeha Friday seminars, called "Does the Torah Restrict Free Thinking?" And there I argued that the Rambam is not saying it's usher to think about these topics. He's saying it's usher to engage with these topics in a type of thinking that is unreliable, that could lead you to heretical conclusions. And I point to the way that the Rambam talks about it, just the language that he uses of don't occupy your mind with it, and think and be drawn after the hirhure libo, the musings of your heart. And then he says, because not all minds can grasp the truth, but then people will be drawn after the Machshavah Lab. And then he gives examples of this. And his examples are all this, maybe God is one, maybe he's not, and he uses the language of exploring. And he says, each one will be drawn after his mind and imagine that his thought has apprehended the truth. And these topics that the Rambam talks about, clearly he does not hold that it's usher to think about these because he has chapters in the Mishnah Torah about like how do we know that the Torah was given to Moshe from Hashem, in Torah Misinai, and like he goes into Nevuah stuff and Avodah Zarah, so like it's not usher to think about it; it's usher for a person to put themselves in a situation where they lack the mental tools to be able to arrive at the truth reliably, and they're drawn after a certain type of thinking, which I call affective speculation, affective like with an A, like emotional imagination, impelled like thinking. So this is where it's tricky because first of all, where do you draw the line for yourself? Second, where do you draw the line within these ikkarim? In other words, on the one hand, you have a mitzvah of Yichud Hashem, so you have to think about it in order to do the mitzvah, and you're going to read about stuff. You read the Chofas Alavavos, he has a whole section about Yichud Hashem that many Achronim banned because they thought that it would lead you to heresy. But like Rambam would say, no, like you should learn that because that's talking about what God's oneness is, and that's a mitzvah. So like, where do you draw the line in the Iker? So how do you draw the line for yourself? Where do you draw the line in the Iker? And then the third question I think is like, to what extent do these parameters change because of the world that we're living in now? In a world where information is much scarcer and the heretical views that you could be exposed to on a day-to-day basis are like avoidable. So then I think you could make the argument that a person should like hermetically metaphysically seal themselves off from exposure to these things. But we're in a world now where you're being bombarded from Jewish sources about heretical ideas. Like you go to your average Jew, and they say that the soul is a chelek elokam mimal, mamish, that the soul is a piece of the living God from above, and that's being taught as a Jewish idea, and like you have to be able to like think about that and confront that. And you go on the internet and like there's postmodernism here and atheism there and like scientific stuff here. So now the question is, what are you supposed to do? Like, are you supposed to just cut yourself off from reliable Jewish sources who are talking about these things, but be bombarded by non-Jewish, sources of heresy? That does not seem wise, because now you're going to only expose yourself to the bad influences, but cut yourself off to the good influences under the notion that you're going to be like keeping this mitzvah. That doesn't make any sense to me, like there's a certain element of eis lasos l'Hashem hefeir torasecha, like, there's a time to act for Hashem and by violating his Torah. I was listening to a podcast on there are two podcasts on Sforum Chatter released lately about two separate works on the Radak. Okay, so you have the Rabbi Yoram Boguch English translation of the Radak published by Feldheim, which I wrote a book review about a couple weeks ago, which is amazing. And then you have a book by Rabbi Yitzchak Berger about sorry, did I say Rabag? I meant Radak, about the Radak's thought. And that's published by Bar Ilan. Okay, now the Radak wrote an esoteric commentary on Bereshis, I think 2:1 through 4:7. Okay, and it's an allegorical approach to Adam and Chava, Cain and Hevel, and all that stuff. So Rabbi Boguch decided, I'm going to include it to make it accessible, but I'm not going to translate it or annotate it. Okay, so it's in his commentary, but I don't want to reveal any secrets. And Rabbi Berger said, no, I'm actually going to translate the whole thing and expound on it because we're in a world now where like we need this stuff and people need to know that there's an approach to Torah out there that is that is dealing with these questions and that does take it allegorically. And in Radak's time it made sense to conceal it, but now it's we should talk about it. Similarly, I gave a shir part 1 on the Sforno on the Nachash, in yeshiva, and talking about his allegorical approach to Bereshis. And I was asked to not give part 2 because I shouldn't talk about this publicly. I disagree with the decision, but of course I'm going to defer to it because it's the yeshiva. But I think that there are many kids who go off the derech because they think that the only approach to Gan Eden story is a literalist approach, and they're not aware that our Rishonim have taken it allegorically. So so am I answering your question? No, I'm saying that it's more complicated, and that you should definitely consult your Rebbe about this, or your Rebbeim, but like they might have differing opinions here. And you have to know yourself to the best you can. You have to know what alternatives you're going to fall into if you don't try to explore this through Jewish sources. And you have to use all the resources at your disposal. Like when I go into these areas, I do read, like there was a time when I did not read Ralbag on certain topics because I did not want to expose myself to the risk of this kafira thing. But now I realize I'm in too far. Like you cannot teach Iyov without confronting the question of God's knowledge and God's hashgacha. And I have Rishonim who are at odds with each other, and I have to learn it. So I am going into these areas now, and I'm asking and consulting experts when I have questions, but I also have to rely on my own mind. Oh, sorry. And then there's one fourth complication also. Sorry, this is a long answer. Is what is an ikar? Right? Rambam holds there's 13 ikkarim. Alba holds there's 3 ikkarim. Kreskas holds there's 26 ikkarim. Which things are ikkarim and which ones are not. Rambam holds that Mashiach is an ikkar, and Alba holds that it's not. So if I go into an area, let's say I deal with the question of is the Rebbe the Mashiach, or can the Mashiach come from the dead? Rambam might say that if I'm prone to like being carried away by that, I'm in danger of denying an ikkar, whereas the Alba would say, no, you're not. That's not one of the ikkarim. And then there's questions of, does the Rishon think that he's denying the ikar? And we'll talk about this later, but Ralbag would hold that if you ask Ralbag, does God know everything? Ralbag would say yes. And if you ask Rambam, do you hold God knows everything? He'd say yes. But if you ask Rambam, does Ralbag hold that God knows everything? He would say no. Because they have different definitions of knowledge and truth and God's knowledge. Similarly, Ralbag has this controversial shita that the universe was not created yesh me'ayin. It was not created something out of nothing, which is the mainstream view in Judaism. He holds that God created the universe out of an eternally existing primordial matter, like Plato. Okay, not Play-Doh, Plato. Okay, but the thing is, so if you ask Rambam, is Ralbag at odds with the Masorah? Then Rambam would say, yeah, he is. But if you ask Ralbag holds that all of Chazal held the way he did, and so like it depends on who you ask about what is an ikar and what constitutes denying an ikar. Reactions?
And I felt for most of what you were saying, like you were answering,
Yeah.
which is that you have to know yourself and,
Yeah.
talk to trusted sources and do things at the right time. Maybe don't jump into those things early on, but if you get to a point where you kind of have firm footing in other sources and you have a good idea of what the parameters are, of what everybody agrees on and what might
Yeah.
be, like that, okay, good. But then the last thing you said kind of threw me off because then it sounded like, if somebody who one person says as a one Rishon says as a kofar, and then that
Right.
person who thinks that everybody else says what they say,
Yeah.
I just don't know how to resolve that type of
Yeah. I know.
uh,
And there,
well, I mean, like does a person just can then get to lowest common denominator? You can only like know for sure what everybody agrees on. That seems
right. So
wrong.
it is funny. There are 2 books I'm aware of that attempt to map out what the common denominator is. One of them, I don't remember the name, and do I even remember the author? Hold on. I'm blanking on the author's name. Okay, so that one I don't know, but he attempts to basically say like, what can everyone agree on in Judaism? Because there's a lot of machlokas, and he's talking about theologically. Why am I blanking on the name? I read it a long time ago, and I must have lent out my copy because I have not seen it in about a decade. The other book is called, hold on, let me just quickly unblur this. The Limits of Orthodox Theology, by Maimonides' 13 Principles Reappraised by Mark B. Shapiro. So he attempts to go through basically a history of the Rambam's ikkarim. Hold on, let me just blur this again. A history of the ikkarim, the Rambam's 13 ikkarim, and then to chart out where's their consensus and where do people disagree. So I found this to be a very informative book. But you know what one of my Rebbeim said about this, Rabbi Zucker said about this book, about, was it, when did the book come out? It came out in 2004. So he said about this, I think, 10 years ago. Uh, don't read it. And he said the book is not worth the energy it would take to strike a match to burn it. Those were his words. you know. And I don't remember exactly what his objection was, but I think one of the objections that, if not from him, an objection that some people have is because he is trying to answer the question of what do the various people in Judaism, Jewish thinkers hold. It's like he lays them all out by saying here is a range of opinions, and it's easy for the reader to walk away and think that if there are multiple opinions, then they're all like equally valid. So for example, the third ikar about God's incorporeality, he mentions, the Rambam obviously holds that God is not only not a body, but has absolutely no physical qualities whatsoever. We would say that that is a mainstream view. He argues that Rav Moshe Taku, who was one of the Bali Tosfos, held that God could become physical. And that's a minority view that we would say is wrong. But like, if a person read this, he would say, oh yeah, so like, Rambam's ikkarim are challenged. Like, not everyone holds that God is non-physical. And the thing is that in some cases you could just go by the common denominator, but in other cases you can't. Like, you really can't, because according to one view, then you're going to be holding by heresy. And if you take that view, the other view is gonna be heresy. So like, and I think part of this also, part of my objection to this is, this does
Part of your objection to what?
to that kind of approach of like, should I just hold by stuff that people wouldn't call me a heretic for? I know that's not the motive, but I'm saying like I will bar my mind from any views that people could call heretical. You end up getting to a thing where you're actually not thinking. Like, you're just trying to avoid. It becomes a very fear-based way of going about your learning, which may be appropriate at a certain developmental stage, or in certain areas, but like, I think that could be unhealthy in terms of it could stunt a person's development as an adult, to just be like turning off your mind from certain areas because you're afraid that you're going to lose your chelik in olam haba. I just don't know if that is what the Rambam, even the Rambam, had in mind when he laid out the ikkarim. So, and again, I just don't see it. Like, I see what happens to people who do that. And again, in our yeshiva, I think because we are so pro Rambam, like, there are times when thinking is shut down because people are just afraid of punishment, and it strikes me as not what a truth-seeking mind ought to be doing at a certain developmental stage. Again, I think for kids, then you should do this, and even for teenagers, for people in their 20s, it's not a black or white thing. Like, I think, but I just think I'm just pointing out that the extreme, I think, is unhealthy. Because then you end up getting into the problem talking about, back to what Vega was saying about catechisms. Like, we're not a religion of catechisms where like I pledge allegiance to the Rambam's exact formulation of the 13 ikkarim, and that's my ticket into olam haba. And if I just believe these things, then I'm going to go to olam haba. That's just not our religion. Yeah, Ruchel's been waiting patiently. Yeah, Ruchel.
I really, really, really want to disagree with what you're saying. I'm sorry. I just like, I
Okay,
really,
go ahead.
can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I partially agree, but I really just, something in my gut is telling me that that is not a fair assessment of people who, I mean, maybe there is a certain, feeling of like not wanting, just wanting to pledge allegiance to what the Rambam says, but maybe also people are being careful and cautious to not just go off and, see different things. Maybe, a certain hesitation to not, maybe there's an emotion there that a person could confront and somebody could teach them. And if a person has good guidance, they could say, you know what, I think you're ready to expand a little bit. It's not fira to consider this other possibility. But I don't think that that's such a bad thing that people are cautious to not entertain every view.
No, I don't think that I'm not criticizing the people. I'm criticizing the way that it lands when taken to an extreme. And of the two possibilities, I think it's better to land there than to land in the in where many philosophically minded people are, where they're just like free thinkers. But I don't think that, again, I think all extremes are bad, and I think that this is an extreme that this is a move that people make, is people who are on extremes in an area tend to attach it to authority figures and think that that is what the authority figure is saying. And I don't think that this is the type of thinking. I don't think that that kind of caution is synonymous with what the Rambam had in mind when he put out these ikkarim. Like again, you listen to Rav Pesach's shir on the ikkarim, and his theory, as I understand it, is that the Rambam is basically trying to chart a course for a person to be able to differentiate between what is a fundamental truth and what is not in order to guide thinking. That's very different than a catechism, where you are, like boxing in your thinking to
Right, I'm
verbal
just saying it's not
translations.
binary. It's not binary. It's
Right.
not that people are
I
either
I
doing
literally just
catechism
said that,
or
Esme. I
preface.
said it's not binary. I said it's the spectrum. I said it's different.
I don't know, there's something about your lashon that just sounds very dismissive to me in a way that I think is something a person should just take with caution.
Okay. I think the Ron would agree. Racheli?
I was gonna ask, like, in this case with Prologue, do you wait, do you hear me? Am I
I
clear?
am. Yeah, you're quiet, but I can hear you.
Okay. Do you consider Rambam to be like correct on this matter, and then that these ideas from Malbim are heretical? And if so, do you, when you're reading his commentary or learning it, do you like approach it with that conclusion in mind and kind of like not fully entertain the ideas, or you do? Like you just say, I'm gonna meditate on his side too, and then come
Right.
to it.
Yeah. So I think here, this is another part of the answer to the question about what a person should do, is that I do think that a person should go based on the mainstream view, and treat that as the fundamental, and then avoid, you know, giving equal weight to the minority view, um, and in other words, keeping in mind that it is a minority view. Whether the Rambam's view is so because of that, then Rambam is definitely a minority here. Because of that, then I definitely uh operate with the Rambam's view on this matter of omniscience as the ikar. But I don't know enough to say that it's heretical, that what the Rambam is saying is heretical, and that's another thing, that you could read the Rambam's ikkarim. I spoke about this last time, that like the Rambam in his formulation of the eighth ikar, which is Torah min Hashemayim, says that every single pasuk comes from was said to Moshe from Hashem, but it's a machlokas tanaim whether the last psukim of the Torah were written by Yoshua or not. Now the Rambam in his ikar is presenting it as though this is as though the language that Rav Pesach gives is, there's like the ikar and then there's the ikar of the ikar. So the ikar is that the Torah comes from Hashem, and then there's the Rambam specific view within that ikar, which is every pasuk comes from Hashem, through Moshe Rabbeinu. But Rambam would acknowledge that the Tanaim who held that, and the Rishonim who hold that the last psukim were not from Moshe Rabbeinu, are still holding by the general ikar, even though they disagree with his particular. Okay. Similarly, Rambam in his fourth ikar says the fourth ikar is that Hashem is eternal, and is the only eternal being. And the Rambam would say that, therefore, if you hold by Aristotle that the universe is eternal, then that's a denial of the ikar. But then the Rambam says that if you hold by Plato or Rabag, Rambam doesn't say Rabag because Rabag came afterwards, but if you hold by Plato that there's an eternally existing matter, then that's not a denial of that ikar, even though the Rambam would disagree with it. So in other words, there's the overarching ikar, and then there's then there is a certain like wiggle room within the ikar. So I don't know for sure what the Rambam would say. This is why I say might be a heretic, because Rabag definitely disagrees with Rambam about divine knowledge, but would he consider that disagreement to put the Rabag in the category of kfira? I don't know. So to answer your question is I would advise, keeping the mainstream in mind, and then to the extent that you expose yourself to the other side, that goes based on the factors that we were talking about, and you should be careful. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this? It's fine. This is the second year in our prologue series that we get into a discussion of the ikkarim, but I mean that's the nature of the book here. Okay, so going on with our answer to the methodology question about which commentaries to learn. So I think that, let me see if there's anything else in the Rambam that I want to say. Just give me 1 second. Oh, another advantage is that Rambam has seen Rambam, but Rambam hasn't seen Rambam, right? So like you get a two-way dialogue sometimes within the Rambam because he can actually talk out differences between him and the Rambam, but Rambam didn't know Rambam because he came before him, so you can't necessarily see that. Okay. Third one is Malbim. Okay. So the pros is that he takes a largely Maimonidean approach, okay, especially to the first two chapters, which we're going to talk about why that's important today, okay, and comments on every pasuk and explains every word and phrase in depth, philologically, sorry, with a hybrid sensibility. Okay, the con is that Malbim's approach to Hebrew is idiosyncratic. Okay, meaning that that he developed his own approach to the Hebrew language, his own approach to philology, and so like, it's not going to necessarily, like, he might read psukim, I guess, and might read psukim in radically different ways. Which again, to a certain extent, that's kind of true in Iyov in general, that there are words that are subject to large machlokas. But so that's one con. Again, and when I say con, I mean I don't mean that it's negative. I just mean that like you have to, when you're weighing factors, you're weighing the pros against these. It's very long commentary. Okay, which again is a double-edged sword. It's good because he's explaining everything, but it can get tedious. Another pro is that it's available in English. And then this part is subjective to me. Okay, is I think he does chapters 1 through 31 justice, but I personally am not sold on his explanation of chapters 32 through 42, which is, quote unquote, the answer. Okay, so like the way I did this in when I've taught you in the past, and the way I'm going to do this now is relying very heavily on the Malbim for the rounds of a debate between Iyov and his three friends who are articulating like the not correct answers, and then switching after that to other Mefarshim for the answer. And then the last one is, this is the when I say 3 or maybe 4 is our new friend Zerachia Chain. Okay, so the pros are very Maimonidean, and hybrid explains every pasuk. The main con is only available in an unreliable PDF and difficult to read manuscript. Okay, and I have now started using it, and it is very difficult, even in the PDF, to like make out what the words say. And so it's it's we'll see how it turns out. But those are my recommendations, and this is not to the exclusion of all others, but these are the ones that I have found the most useful so far. So that is my answer to that question. And so what we're gonna, like I said, what we're gonna do is I'll just state this here just as a the plan. Okay, is rely heavily on Malbim for the rounds of debate between Iyov and Eliphaz, Bildad, and Sofar. Then switch to what do you call it? To Rambam, Ralbag, and Zerachia Chain for the answer. So Racheli in the chat says, "What do I think of Shadal's commentary?" I'm actually not familiar with Shadal's commentary on this. I will say Shadal will give you something unique because Shadal was anti-philosophy and anti-Kabbalah. And so I don't know what he would hold about this. And so I actually don't. I've just literally never looked at it. So maybe that'll be for future learning. Okay. Let me just think if there's anything else I want to say on this issue because I feel like something else needs to be said. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I think there's something in here that maybe I'm just thinking about this connected to the last night here on Aselach Arav. We actually did not talk about this yet, but the Meiri that we are going to learn talks about, there's Gemaras that say you should have only one Rav, and there are Gemaras or statements of Chazal that say you should have many Ravs, okay? And it's a big question about like where to draw the line. Like what types of learning is it beneficial to only have one Rav, and what types of learning is it beneficial to have many Ravs? So when it comes to issues like this, like the ikkarim, you know, I do think one of the difficulties is there, again, just speaking of my own rebbeim, there are many great thinkers in my yeshiva, and they take radically different views on these issues. And that's one of the reasons why I think that, like, maybe in a world where you only learned physically with someone and where you have, like, I don't know, one teacher, is just, it is easier to not have to confront certain issues. But like, when you have multiple rebbeim that are all thinkers, you kind of have to, at the end of the day, you have to rely on your own mind, and you cannot just proceed. What I'm trying to say is that you cannot just, it is impossible to just play it safe in certain areas, because you'll have thinkers on both sides saying that if you play it safe by me, then you're going to deny the ikar according to him, and vice versa. So that was the main thing I was speaking out against. That, like, I just don't think it's possible to play it safe. Here, like, I'll give you an example of this again. Like, I am convinced that the Rambam does not hold by Gehenna, the traditional view of Gehenna. Okay, other people are convinced that the Rambam does hold by the traditional view of Gehenna. If you agree with me, you're now in a situation where many people will say that you're denying a fundamental, because Gehenna is part of the fundamental reward and punishment. And you'll even get people saying that you're not reading the Rambam correctly. Like the Ramban says that the Rambam holds by Gehenna. Okay. Now I have Rebbeim, I have some Rebbeim who side with me, saying that the Rambam does not hold by Gehenna. I have other Rebbeim saying that the Rambam does hold by Gehenna. And I have other Rebbeim who say we shouldn't be talking about this. So what am I supposed to do? At the end of the day, I got to rely on my own mind. So that's what I mean by you can't always just play it safe. And again, if you step outside of this Maimonidean circle, you've got people, you can get people who say that if you are neglecting Kabbalah and Hasidus, you are denying certain fundamentals like Gilgul, reincarnation of the soul, and Tzimtzum, and God, constricting himself to create the universe, and Chelik Eloka Mimal, that the soul is a piece of God, and all these other things. And you're denying Zohar or the Ari, which are works of Torah Sheba'al Peh, and you're essentially denying Torah Min Hashemayim, And if you go by the other view, who holds that those works are heretical, they'll say don't believe any of that stuff. So it's just, that's what I mean when I'm talking about this. Like, it is very nice on paper to say that you have to be cautious, and you should be cautious. I'm not disagreeing with that, Esty, and that I'm not saying it's black and white. I'm saying that it does lend itself to degree, but I'm saying at the end of the day, I don't think a person can just be cautious, because it's impossible to do that because of the particulars. Being cautious in one way is going to lead to lack of caution in another way. I think it's not possible.
I was not saying to just be cautious. I was saying not to deride people who are stuck on a certain position, and
right,
not to say that they should be stuck. I'm just saying not to deride that.
Right. I think if we go back and listen to the shir, I do not think you will hear me deriding those people. So I just want to make that very clear. Yeah, Racheli?
I just wanted to comment kind of on like how
We can disagree.
Yes, we can disagree.
on like what I hear you say and like what I think of that.
Yeah,
Like I know for me that I feel like I recently started exploring Judaism in a little bit of a different way than most of my high school, not high school, like education from elementary school. And
yeah,
because of that, I feel like I don't necessarily have like, years of learning and study and like deep grasps of like fundamental concepts. So
right,
therefore, I think like for someone like me or in a similar situation, it is very beneficial not necessarily to rule out anything, but to just understand that like I don't have like I almost don't like trust my own authority to like choose an opinion yet, which might sound
right.
like, how can you not trust yourself? But like I feel like I can't. And that's just like in a kind of liminal space where like probably in a long time I'll be more secure in choosing certain opinions or whatever. But yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So there's a good Marcus Aurelius quote that let's just see if I can find it. Excuse me. No, it's not gonna lead to it. Let me just think if I can remember where it is. Give me 1 second. Um uh okay, there's no I can find this. I've been down too many pages. But the gist of it, he just said it much more eloquently, is like it is totally fine to suspend judgment, especially if you do not view your judgment as reliable. Like there's no urgency to have an opinion in these areas. And so like I think that's totally fine. And I want to quote the advice of my Rebbe, Rabbi Moskowitz. So the questions I've heard him answer this question many times. Question that people ask is, you know, everyone agrees that you need a Rebbe, but the question is, how do you choose a Rebbe? Because you would say, well, choose someone who's qualified, but the problem is if you don't know who's qualified, like, how do you get started? Like, how do you choose a person based on your lack of qualifications? How do you assess whether they're qualified? So the answer that Rabbi Moskowitz says, he says, find the people who consistently give clear and satisfying answers to your questions. Again, doesn't mean that they have to answer every question, but like who there's a consistent track record of, oh, I'm getting clear answers and it makes sense to me from those people, and then those are the people who should be your Rebbeim. And again, it could be multiple people, but like that's like I think the best that you can do when you are emerging from a situation of like lack of experience or bad education. There's different things. Another thing I want to just mention here is the analogy that I often use. So when I was teaching at Shalhevet, and usually when I was teaching the ninth graders in our Tefillah 101 class, then sometimes these students would be what's the word I'm looking for? Disillusioned by hearing stuff like, oh, God is not physical, God can't change, God doesn't have emotions. And they would feel that they were kind of like betrayed or like sold a what's the idiom, sold a bill of false goods, whatever. Growing up, and the way I would be Malamed Zechus on their teachers, I mean, I'm sure they really were misled by people who didn't know any better, but to be Malamed Zechus on them, I give you the analogy that on most people's smartphones, they have apps, and the apps update, and there are certain apps that automatically update, and then there are ones that you have to manually update. Like it asks you for permission, and you have to like manually update them. So what I sense happens in a lot of cases is that I mean, again, in certain cases, the teachers themselves don't have these ikkarim, and that's why they teach things that are contrary to them. But in certain cases, I think the teacher just assumes that the kid has already gotten updated by the previous teacher, but they haven't, and so then they get passed from grade to grade, and you end up getting yourself in 12th grade and you have the ideas about God of a second grader because no one has updated them in these ways, and they're alongside things that are updated. So like there's like an imbalance in terms of views that are where they should be in 12th grade, and then views where are, you're still operating on childish notions. And then that's part of what contributes to this feeling of like, what in my own mind do I believe anymore? Like, I don't know what aspects are real and what aspects are not. And again, the only way I can really like answer that is with Rabbi Moskowitz's advice, is like, ask questions of all the knowledgeable people around you, and gravitate towards the people who are consistently giving you clear and answers that make sense.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Okay, good. That was a good discussion about the fundamentals here. Okay, so let's now go back to Iyov. Okay, very quick review, just a one-liner here. We read Iyov 1 through 5, which is the preface of the prologue, or the backstory. And the main approach of the Malbim was that since this is a book about the problem of Tzaddik V'Ra'lo, then we need to rule out normal causes of Ra in Iyov's case. Because if we didn't, the book would never get off the ground. Okay, so in other words, like, for example, if you could chalk Iyov's suffering up to, he's not perfected in his Shmiras HaMitzvos, then the answer is very simple. Okay, so like, therefore it teaches us that he was God-fearing and Sar Me'Ra. Yeah. Okay, so that was the function of the preface. Okay, any lingering questions about that? And again, it's kind of like the key word here is normal causes, because obviously there is a cause, and obviously the debate in the next 38 chapters is going to deal with that, but like, it can't be an obvious cause, because then there would be no room for the debate. Okay, so then I believe we translated these psukim last time, but I think in the interest of time, I just read through them really quickly. So I want to go and just make sure that we get the words here, and then we'll go into depth on this part. Okay, so Vayhi Hayom, it was the day, which I'm going to mention this even though I don't learn Iyov like Rashi. Rashi notes here, and I've always wanted to understand this particular point here, and I don't even know if Rashi's quoting a Chazal. Oh wait, this is the wrong part. 1:6. Vayhi Hayom, Oso Yom Shahaya Rosh Hashanah. Okay, that day that was Rosh Hashanah. Okay, just FYI. Okay, this whole dialogue between God and the Satan is happening in Rosh Hashanah according to Rashi. Okay, it was the day. Vayevo b'nei ha'Elohim lihisyativ al Hashem, and the b'nei ha'Elohim came to station themselves before Hashem. Now, we are not going to go into angels here, okay? But I just want to show you the Rambam where he references the angels, so you'll have this in your mind. So the Rambam says in Yesodei Torah 2, I'm just trying to think how far back to go. But I'm gonna err on the side of only doing what's relevant here. So he mentions that there are different levels of angels. So the different levels of angels, Eino ma'alas makom, do not refer to physical location. Okay, like a person sitting above his friend. Okay, so this is he says, what does it mean that one angel is above the other? He says it's like when you say one chacham is on a higher level than the other, or in the same sense that a cause is on a higher level than the effect. Okay, so that's what it means that the angels are one level above the other. Yeah, Esti?
Sorry, just about the Rosh Hashanah point. I know it's not a main thing or anything like
Sure.
that. Is that like saying that this is about like when a person is like, so to speak, assessed with Hashem?
So it's a good, it's a possibility that this is tied to the judgment of Rosh Hashanah. It's also a possibility that it's alluding to this dialogue happened in the creation of the world, and like this is part of the property of like the inception of the world. I'm more inclined to think that. And then I guess another possibility is that, whenever we learn Mishlei, we always try to ask what's the practical decision-making application. When I teach Tehillim, I say what's the practical takeaway from the Tehillim. I don't know what the practical takeaway from Iyov is, but it's possible that the practical takeaway is relevant to how a person approaches Rosh Hashanah. Like I just noticed, I don't think my edition of Rashi has this parenthesis, so I don't know what the Al Torah edition is. He says, "Osu Yom Shaya Rosh Hashanah Shu Yom Trua." That is a day of sounding the shofar or crying. V'tziva Hakadosh Baruch Hu l'Satan lahavi zechus v'chova shel kol habrios. And God commanded the Satan to bring the merit and liability of each of all the creatures. Ha'udichsiv mishut ba'aretz, which is what is meant when it says that the Satan was wandering the earth. So the fact that I guess this edition of Rashi brings in shofar might mean that in our observance of Rosh Hashanah, like these ideas are relevant to how to take into account. So those are three possibilities. Maybe there's more. Okay, so the different levels of angels are based on like one chacham is higher than the other, or the cause is higher than the effect. Which is I'm smiling because I'm remembering this anecdote that I like telling, that my high school Rebbe, Rabbi Fox, was in one of the earliest years of our yeshiva. And in the earliest years of our yeshiva, Rabbi Chait was still, like you can hear from the shirim, was still kind of like in high school Rebbe mode because he had been a high school Rebbe before. So his early students, on those shirim kind of talked to him with the casualness and what might be perceived as like chutzpah of like students who are talking to their high school Rebbe, So back in the day, Rabbi Chait used to give Gemara shir on Shabbos, or Rav Chaim shir. And I remember the very first time, or one of the first times I heard Rabbi Fox in the shir, then Rabbi Chait gave an explanation, and Rabbi Fox did not like it and did not understand it. So they went back and forth trying to understand it. And so Rabbi Chait finally said, again, these are not exact words, but like, I don't know why you can't understand it. It's just like, and he gave him an example from another area of halacha. And Rabbi Fox said, great, now there are two things I don't understand. So like when the Rambam is saying, okay, you want to understand how one angel is on a higher level than the other, it's very easy. It's just like two chachamim are on different levels, and it's just like causes are on different levels than effects. So now you're like, so now you're just bringing in, it's just epistemology. Like it's very easy. Now we understand it, So whatever it is, he then says the different levels. Shinu shemos malachim al shem ma'alasum hu. So the differences in the levels of angels are based on their differences the differences in the names of angels are based on their level. Lefikach nikraim chayos hakodesh im lamala al kol. So therefore, I'm going to just use a notepad here to type this out. Therefore, hold on. Sorry. Too many windows. They are called. So level 1 is Chayos HaKodesh. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Chayos HaKodesh, okay, which are literally like the transcendent creatures, is how I would translate it. Okay, like Chayos like animals, and like Kodesh is transcendent. Okay, they're the ones above everyone. Okay, so then then Ofanim. Okay, anyone know what Ofanim literally means? Wheels. Okay, so I got the wheelie angels. Okay, they're always doing popping wheelies. Elim. I don't know what that is. I don't know what the literal translation is. Chashmalim. Okay, which became a modern Hebrew term. Anyone know what chashmal is in modern Hebrew?
Electricity.
Yeah, right. Electric angels. Okay, battery operated, but they never run out. Srafim, which means
Fiery?
Burning.
fiery
fire.
angels. Okay, then you've got malachim, which is also the generic term for angels, but what does malachim literally mean?
Messenger.
Yeah, so people translate as messenger, which is fine. I think actually the better term is agents. Okay, because you could also be like Ibn Ezra says it comes from the word of malacha, which is like a task or a fulfillment of some like plan, whatever. Okay, then you've got Elohim, which is also a generic term for angels, which are literally forces or powers. Okay, and then you have our category, B'nai Elohim, which are like I guess you could either call them like offspring of forces and powers, okay, or descendants of. I think offspring is probably better. And then you've got Kruvim, which people call cherubs. And then there are Ishim, okay, which are literally persons, okay. And the Rambam says, that these are called Ishim because these are the ones that talk to the Nevi'im. Okay. Now, why is this important? Or why am I telling you this now? Because what we're about to read is going to be a very cryptic, statement about like the heavenly retinue, and presumably it's very important that the author of Iyov is using this specific term for angels, and not other terms. Okay, so this is like an example of how if you don't know, there is certain background knowledge that like you need in order to even interpret the text. Like if you just loosely translate as angels, you're going to miss out on this nuance here. And I also wanted to bring this up because I just got I heard this other shiur where when I mentioned that one of the cons of both the Rambam and the Ralbag is that they're Aristotelian. So, Aristotle was writing about metaphysics, but he was also writing about physics, and his metaphysics is tied to his physics. So I heard this shiur by Rabbi Chaim Eisen, who said that the fact that the Rambam says that there are only 10 angels, that's not something that the Rambam got from Psukim. That's something that was tied to his view of physics and the celestial spheres, and the belief that there were 10 spheres, or that the spheres had some facet of 10, and that the Rambam might not hold that now. But so now the question is, how do you separate his interpretation of angels, which are a metaphysical reality, from his assessment of the physical world, which we now know is outdated? And Rabbi Eisen used the term, you need someone to perform microsurgery on the Rambam to be able to like separate out the invalid Aristotelian physical premises from the eternally valid metaphysical premises, and that's something that we just don't have now. I mean, I don't know anyone who like has that much of a mastery of the Rambam and of Aristotelian physics and modern physics to be able to perform that surgery. So like that's again, this is why it's a con, because like how much of these ideas were dependent on outdated Aristotelian things. I don't know any way to answer that question. Okay, so those are the Bnei Elohim. They came to station themselves before Hashem. Vayavo gam hasatan bezocham. And the Satan also came among them. Okay. And again, I know we went over this last time, but I just want to go over it in depth now. And again, if you have questions, then stop me here, because I don't think we had time for questions last time. The Yomer Hashem el Satan. Hashem said to the Satan, Me'ayin tavo, where did you come from? V'yana Satan, and the Satan answered. Sorry, I don't know why it keeps switching font. Answered as Hashem, Vayomar, and said, Mishut ba'aretz umihis halachba, from wandering the earth and walking around on it. Okay, his halech is reflexive, and I think one of the uses of that, at least here, is like it's an aimless walking, meaning it's not walking from point A to point B, it's walking around. I don't know if that's related to the reflexive of like making yourself walk, but like pacing, good question. I don't know if pacing, I guess that'll depend on how we learn the metaphor. Okay. Spoiler alert, it's a metaphor. Okay. V'yomer Hashem el Satan. Hashem said to the Satan, Hasamta libacha al avd Iyov, have you taken note of my servant Iyov? ki ein kamohu ba'aretz, for there is no one on earth like him. Ish tam yashar yirei elokim v'sar me'ara, a man who is tam yashar yirei elokim and sar me'ara, which we defined earlier. Okay, so vayana Satan es Hashem. The Satan answered Hashem, vayomar, and said, Hachinam yare Iyov Elokim. Now I forgot how I translated this last time, but how would you translate hachinam? What does chinam mean?
Free.
Yeah, Tamar.
Is it for free?
Okay, yeah. So the I've heard that this is a modern Hebrew usage of chinam is free. Like someone told me once when I was teaching Iyov that if you go around and you see like these free newspapers, it'll say like chinam on it. Yeah, and then basis is the other one, right? So does Iyov fear God? And so I think two ways to translate this would be without reason, or sorry, without a basis. Okay, or freely. Okay, we'll see both kind of amount to the same thing. Okay, from his argument here. Halo ata sachta ba'ado uva'ad beso uva'ad kol asher lo misaviv. Is it have you not so I would translate sachta as shielded, but I guess the strict translation would be made a protective hedge around him and around his house. Sorry, not him, capital, around him and around his household of ad kol asher lo, and around everything he has all around. Ma'ase yada birachta. You can learn this as part of the same sentence. You blessed the work of his hands, umiknehu paras ba'aretz, and his livestock burst forth over the land. V'ulam, however, I skipped a number. 10. Okay. However, shlach na yadcha, send forth your hand, v'ga b'chol asher lo, and strike everything that belongs to him. Halo imlo al panecha yivaracheka, and will he not bless? Okay, which in this context means, i.e., curse you to your face. Okay. And then Hashem responds, and that'll be the end of this part. Yomar Hashem el Satan. Hashem said to the Satan, Hine kol asher lo biadacha. Behold, everything he has, like owns, is in your hand. Rak elav al tishlach yadcha. Only do not send forth your hand against him. Okay. V'yitei Satan im pnei Hashem. And the Satan left from before the presence of Hashem. Okay, so what just happened there? What are the questions and problems on this? Which we did not get to last time. Yeah, Racheli?
I don't know if the Satan came up in other shirim yet, but like, what is the Satan?
Okay, so one of the major questions is going to be what or who is this Satan? Yeah. What else? Yeah, Racheli?
Why does he have an interest in like almost like provoking God's like negative influence on Eov's life?
Yeah, what is his motive in like challenging Hashem's view of Iyov? Yeah, Fega?
One question and one observation, but the question is like, what's the setting? Like the B'nai Elohim and the day, just
right.
like what's happening there?
What is this setting of the B'nai Elohim and the day and the standing before Hashem? Yeah.
And the observation is that the Satan doesn't respond to any of the questions so clearly. Like they're all very vague. And like, for example, have you taken note of Iyov? He doesn't say yes. He like starts talking of like he doesn't really he just starts talking about Iyov's fearing God, which like it just I don't fully understand why he responds the way he does, if that makes
Well,
sense.
okay, so I mean, just in terms of shot here. So Hashem is saying to the Satan, have you noticed this guy Iyov? No one is like him. He's Tam Yashar Relikim Sar Meira. And then the Satan is actually, let's pose this as a question here. Okay.
Like
Yeah.
he kind of just seems a bit slimy.
Okay, yeah. What question or claim is the Satan making? Sorry, is the Satan making about Iyov in response to Hashem's observation? Yeah. Okay, I think that would cover your question. Okay, Ayala.
Why it's interesting that Hashem is the one who like kind of starts the conversation about you. Like, why is Hashem bringing this up?
Yeah. Okay. What is Hashem's motive in initiating this dialogue about Iyov with the Satan? Yeah. Alex?
Kind of furthering that, once the Satan starts being like argumentative, I don't know if that's the right word. Like, why engage further? Like,
Okay, yeah.
why bother?
What is Hashem's interest in, I'll put this in quotation marks, in like, I don't know if I want to say giving in or taking up the Satan, the Satan in his claim or challenge, right? In other words, like, why doesn't Hashem just stick to his guns and like say like, yeah, you're just the Satan, like who cares what you think? Yeah, Racheli?
What's the difference between like everything he has is in your hand, but don't send forth your hand against him?
Okay, good. So I just want to extend my question here. I'm realizing what is Hashem's interest in giving in or taking him the Satan in his claim or challenge to the extent of granting permission to strike Iyov's possessions, right? Like Hashem is not just saying like, okay, the good theoretical question. He's actually granting the Satan permission to afflict stuff. And then the question is, why does Hashem limit what the Satan can do? Why only Iyov's possessions? And sorry, that's not about possessions, and not his person. Yeah, Tamar.
I think people sort of asked this question already, but kind of like what changes in the course of the dialogue
Right.
that would change like how Hashem would affect Eo's life.
Right. So what changed between the beginning of the dialogue and after the Satan's challenge? Okay. Yeah, Racheli?
Is there really no other person who like fears God and is
Yeah. Okay. Is Hashem telling the truth? Is there really no other person like Iyov? Remember, this is one of Zrach Chain's indications, examples of hyperbole here, which indicate that the thing is an allegory. We also did not ask the question, who are these, who are these angels? Or who are these B'nai Elohim? And then like, why use that term? Yeah, Afega?
What does it mean that the Satan left from
Right.
like Pnei Hashem?
What does it mean that the Satan left from Hashem's presence? And then similarly, I don't think we asked about the first dialogue before he gets to Iyov, which is what's up with the dialogue with I guess the question and answer between Hashem and the Satan about his location, right? Like and why is this necessary if the point clearly seems to be about Iyov? Okay. All right. So let me give a little introduction here and explain why we are and aren't going to answer some of these questions now. Okay. So I'm going to read the Malbim that we read last time, which he says, the Malbim's commentary on Iyov 1:1. Since this lofty narrative is the introduction and key to the entire disputation recorded in the book, it must contain within it the ultimate aim of the whole argument. Okay, boom. Okay, for it is made known the root of the matter and the truth of the things which gave rise to Iyov's suffering and trials. These were hidden from the eyes of Iyov and from the eyes of his disputing companions until Elihu, the final disputant, revealed the secret of the matter and gave correct and truthful answers. Yet all of this was already concealed in the opening narrative of the book. Okay, so what the Malbim is saying is he's saying that this little section here really does contain all you need to know about why Iyov suffered. But the only thing is that we are privy to this discussion between Hashem and the Satan, but Iyov is not. So Iyov has to go through all these discussions for 38 chapters, or I guess, yeah, 38 chapters, all the way through Elihu and Hashem's responses. And presumably if Iyov had heard this and understood it, he would know why he's suffering, okay? Which just structurally is a very interesting decision about how to write the book. And one of the decisions I'm making as an Iyov teacher, which I don't think this is radical, but it also might not be approved, is I want to teach Iyov through the eyes of how Iyov is experiencing it. So the decision I'm making is, even though a lot of the commentators unpack these psukim right here, and if you were reading the commentary, you would get those ideas right here, I think it makes more sense to because we're in a world where we see this type of suffering, I think it makes more sense to, and because this is shrouded in cryptic language, I think what we need to do is read through Iyov's dialogues with his friends, understand that, then go back and decode this. And when I say that this is not necessarily approved of, I mean, this falls out in the question of, do you think that Iyov is written esoterically or not? So the Rambam holds that Iyov was written in a way that was deliberately concealing these points from the masses. So the masses are supposed to read the entire book and focus on the dialogue, and then only if you're ready for it, then the Rambam will help you understand these cryptic psukim here. But others hold that the book is written for philosophers and that they should encounter these ideas at the outset. So I'm, so to speak, playing it safe by not decoding these allegories right now. We're going to read through this and read through the dialogue and then go back and then decode this later on. Okay, that's the game plan. So of these questions that we just raised, which are all good questions, the only question I'm going to answer here is, what claim is the Satan making about Iyov in response to Hashem's observation? And I think that's it, okay? Because that's directly related to the plot, all right? But all these other questions about how to decode these, these allegorical things are going to have to wait until we get to through the dialogue, and then we go back and decode it, okay? Even understanding what the angels are and what the Satan is. I want to read one more thing also from the Rambam. Now, remember, Rambam wrote the Moreh Nevuchim in Judeo-Arabic, so I have here a Hebrew translation from Kafich and an English translation from Goodman. So I'm going to read the Hebrew. Parshas Iyov hamufla'a v'hanifla'a hi misug ma she'anachnu bo. So this Goodman says the strange and wonderful story of Job belongs to the family of issues we are dealing with here. Klomar, meaning to say, shu mashal lebiur hashkafos b'nei adam b'hashgacha. That's an allegory bringing clarity to people's views on divine providence. V'kvar yadata, you already know ma'amar echad mehem b'ferush. You know the explicit statement of one of the sages, Iyov lo haya v'lo nivra elo mashal haya, that Iyov never existed, there was no such person, and Iyov was an allegory. Vasher chashav shuhu haya v'nivra, and regarding the people who thought that Iyov did exist, v'shu ma'aseh shahaya, and the thing actually happened, lo yada lo zman v'lo makam. They don't know the time nor the place that it happened. Ela echad hachachamim amar shai b'mei avos. Some of the chachamim said that it was in the time of the avos. V'echad amar shai b'mei Moshe. Others said it was in the time of Moshe. V'echad amar shehi b'mei David. Others said it was in the time of David. Echad amar shehu shahaya me'olei Bavel. Some said it was the time when they came back from Bavel. V'zeh mima shemechazik divrei mi she'amar shehu lo haya v'lo nivra klal v'lo nivra. This strengthens the view of the person who says that Iyov never existed. All right, we've talked about this before. Okay, but now he says like this: klalo shel davar bein haya bein lo haya. But the sum of the matter, whether he existed or not, hari b'kiyotze b'me'ora hamatzui tamid navuhu kol hachokrim mibnei adam. Ad she'amru v'yedias Hashem. Oh, sorry, not yet. V'yedias Hashem uv'hashkachaso ma shekvar he's karti l'cha. So whether Iyov existed or not, cases like this trouble every thoughtful person. So things are said about God's knowledge and providence, like those I cited for you in the earlier chapters. Klomar ma sheha'adam tzadik hashalim yashar hamasim yirei hachet biyoser ba'im alav yisurim gedolim tchufim b'rechusha uv'banav b'gufo lo b'chet hamachayav kain. An innocent man, so in other words, people are bothered by an innocent and righteous man who lived with integrity and scrupulously shunned sin, is stricken by one disaster after another to his fortune, his offspring, and his body through no fault of his own. So in other words, whether you hold Iyov is an allegory or not, the questions are relevant, okay, to everyone. Okay, so then he says, Rachel, what's the shocked wow sign in the chat about?
Only that you weren't going to answer all the other questions.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yep. All right. Yeah. I Bleed Netter, I will, but just not for another couple of months. Okay. All right. Then the Rambam comments on the Satan here at the outset. According to these views, Kolomar im haya im lo haya, whether he existed or not, meaning according to both views about whether Iyov is an allegory. Osam hadvarim shehiktim osam. These things in the preface or the prologue, Kolomar devar hasatan v'divrei Hashem l'satan umisiraso biado. Meaning the words of the Satan, the words of Hashem to the Satan, and Hashem giving him over into his hand. All of these are an allegory as any rational person can see. Ella shuhu mashal shelo kamo kol mashalaim, but it's a mashal unlike any other. Ella mashal shetluyim bo niflaos udvarim shem kivshono sha'olam. It is a mashal that the wonders and matters that are the hidden aspects of the universe are dependent on. Goodman says, but this is no ordinary parable. There are surprises here. Cosmic mysteries hinge on it. V'nizbaru bo kushios gedolos. It clears up deep obscurities. V'nizbaru mimenu dvarim amitim she'ein lamala mehem. And sheds light on ultimate truths. Kavak says, it sheds light, it clarifies truths that there are none higher. I will mention whatever is possible to mention. And I'll mention everything I've understood from this great mashal. So in other words, just to summarize here, summary, okay, is that whether or not Iyov as a whole is a mashal, everyone holds that this prologue with the Satan is a mashal, and then I don't know why this is not going in outline mode. Hold on just 1 second here. This is going to bug me. Okay, not just any mashal, but a mashal that reveals the most fundamental and important truths about the universe. Okay, so again, very, very strange thing is that according to, actually, I'm going to give another Iyov methodology principle here. Okay, so this is a Iyov methodology. Okay, point, which is another question. Okay, is how important is it to understand every word, phrase, and pasuk in the Sefer? Okay, so here you also have 3 views. Okay, you have at 2 extremes, you have the Malbim, who's extreme, and then you have, let's call it like most others. Okay, and this is like a mainstream, obviously, and then you have the Rambam. Okay, is another extreme. Okay, so the Malbim holds that every word, phrase, and pasuk in the bulk of the book is teaching ideas that are relevant to understanding the subject matter. Okay, and like nothing is unimportant. Okay, and that's consistent with Malbim's general approach. Okay, most others hold that, like, there are main points being made throughout the book, and they're important, but there's also a lot of like secondary points, poetic filler, and other non-essential parts that we can like not prioritize. Okay, and then the Rambam, according to my understanding, holds there are only a few key psukim throughout the book that contain the main ideas. Okay, everything else is filler deliberately intended to obscure the truth from the masses who aren't ready to understand it. Okay, even to the point where the author mixes up the different opinions in each of Iyov's friends' speeches to throw you off the scent. Okay, so in other words, these psukim here, Iyov 1, 6 through 12, the Rambam holds are key psukim that if you understand that, you will understand almost the like all the main points in the book, or like the main ideas. And then within each of Iyov's friends, there are going to be a couple critical psukim that express the views, and then everything else is just like filler to throw you off the scent. And that's possibly why the Rambam did not write a commentary on all of Iyov. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to why the Rambam made those decisions or not, but he would hold that it's not necessary to learn every single pasuk, and that's why I'm attracted to Zerach Yachin, because Zerach Yachin holds by the Rambam's view of the book as a whole, but Zerach Yachin does explain every single pasuk in the book, presumably to try to like make it make sense in a Maimonidean framework. Okay, so that is another methodology point here. So what are we going to do? So I think what we're going to do, even though we're going to be using the Malbim, we are going to be focusing on the main points, okay? Because otherwise it's just going to take too long. And I'm going to, again, this is a shiur that's paralleling what I do in my high school class. So I do want to keep our eye on the main points, and I'm not going to go through every single thing with my high schoolers. And then when it gets time for the answer in Iyov, we'll switch to the Rambam and go back and then see how the Rambam takes each of the main points. Okay. Even though I said we were going to go through the other part of the story, I do think this is a natural stopping point. So I think let's stop here for today. And then next week should be good. The week after, which is Thanksgiving, I think we'll take a break for Thanksgiving weekend and then resume after that. So next week, the plan will be to do the story of what happens to Iyov, and then maybe unpack some of the philosophy. But it's going to be mostly story time. Okay, thanks for coming, and have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good